Mr. President, I rise this evening to talk about an issue that will affect families all across Michigan, and that's the nomination of Judge Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. He has a long record of siding with special interests and institutions instead of hardworking Americans, and this is of great concern to me. That matters. I'm concerned with his rulings that fail to protect children and students with disabilities in schools. And I'm worried that he will limit access to critical health care for women. And he's not a mainstream candidate. I can't support a nominee who I believe is disconnected from the challenges faced by families in Michigan and across America every day. One important example that relates directly to someone from Michigan that Judge Gorsuch has ruled on. People from Michigan have been hurt by Judge Gorsuch's narrow judicial philosophy. In 2009, a Michigan truck driver named Alphonse Madden was trying to complete a shipment, driving all night, and his brakes froze in sub-zero temperatures, which we have, and the heater in his cab broke as well. He called his company to report the issue and waited for help to arrive. While he was waiting for hours in the freezing sub-zero temperatures, he realized he was having trouble breathing and his body was going numb. He called his company to report that he needed to get somewhere warm. But they told him he needed to either wait for the repair person or drag his trailer even though the brakes were frozen. Worried he might freeze to death, he finally unhitched the trailer from his truck. Mr. Madden drove off to seek help, returning in just 15 minutes with assistance. He did what any of us faced with a life-threatening situation would do. A week later, Mr. Madden was fired from his job, even though he was transparent with his actions and completed his delivery. He completed his delivery, despite the issues caused by his frozen brakes and the broken heater. Two different entities within the Department of Labor ruled that what the trucking company did was illegal and that Mr. Madden was protected under federal law because his life was in danger. Thankfully, a majority of the 10th Circuit judges agreed. Judge Gorsuch, however, disagreed, arguing the law did not protect workers who drove away to avoid freezing to death. According to Judge Gorsuch's interpretation, Mr. Madden would have had to choose between his job and his life. And what is deeply concerning to me is that when he was asked about this at his nomination hearing, what he would have done, he said he really hadn't thought about it. Judges should think about what's happening to people in situations as they are ruling in a fair and impartial way. This does not look like the ruling of a mainstream nominee. His rulings don't only affect Michigan workers. I'm very concerned about Judge Gorsuch's rulings on legal protections for individuals with disabilities. We passed the Individuals with Disabilities Act to make sure that children with disabilities got the education they deserved and that the education would be free and available to all children. So in Luke, a young boy from Colorado with autism was not able to receive the education he needed from his public school. His parents were able to enroll him in a private residential program specializing in children with autism that was more suitable for his needs so he could get what he needed for his development. His parents applied to the school district for reimbursement, as was appropriate, but the school district refused. His parents went to court, and an administrative judge and a district judge both ruled that the school did not provide Luke with the necessary education to meet the needs that IDEA requires. However, Judge Gorsuch ruled in favor of the school district, saying that all the school district had to do was provide an education that was more than just the bare minimum. Just the bare minimum. He set a very low bar for Luke and for students like Luke, like my nephew Barry. Just to show how disconnected Judge Gorsuch is from the lives of everyday Americans, look at the Supreme Court ruling that occurred at the same time as Judge Gorsuch's confirmation hearings. In a different case on the very same issue, the Supreme Court challenged and rejected the standard in interpretation that Judge Gorsuch believes should be provided for children and students with disabilities. They unanimously rejected the standard that he approved. This is not the view of a mainstream nominee. This is not the view of a mainstream nominee. I'm also deeply concerned about Judge Gorsuch's opinions and how they could affect women's access to health care. In the 10th Circuit's Hobby Lobby decision, Judge Gorsuch endorsed the idea that corporations can deny their employees access to essential health care services, including birth control. His concurring opinion suggested that he supported that notion that for-profit corporations, that they have the right to deny women insurance coverage or any form of contraception that an employer disagrees with. This is both alarming and unacceptable. And it once again shows how disconnected Judge Gorsuch is from what women in Michigan and around the country experience. Judge Gorsuch did not recognize the impact of denying coverage to women employees and their families and putting those decisions in the hand of their employers. Women in Michigan should not have to pay higher costs for health care than men, and they should not be denied essential health care services. And these dangerous interpretations will continue to take us down the path of permitting and protecting discrimination by corporations and institutions over the rights of workers and consumers. Again, not a mainstream nominee. And when it comes to supporting women, not just in healthcare, but in the workplace, Judge Gorsuch has had some extremely troubling rulings. In 2003, a woman named Betty Pinkerton experienced several instances of disgusting sexual harassment from a male supervisor at the Colorado Department of Transportation. Every time she made it clear that his comments were not acceptable in any way, they continued over the course of months. She went to her office's civil rights staff and submitted a written complaint, and he was removed as her supervisor. She was fired about a week later. She sued. But Judge Gorsuch upheld a ruling that claimed she waited too long. She waited too long to report harassment and believed that Pinkerton's firing was, quote, performance-based. How often do we hear that in these situations? Despite not being able to produce any real evidence that this was the case. He ruled that she couldn't go to trial and present her case in front of a jury. So when it comes to protecting women in the workplace, we know that Judge Gorsuch has come up short. This is not a mainstream position and not acceptable, in my judgment, for any Supreme Court nominee, not acceptable to what I want to see happen for people in Michigan. I want to end my speech on the importance of consensus, because that's what we should do here. That's how we get things done. For decades, we've confirmed our Supreme Court nominees with consultation and consensus. We have said, and I think it's the right thing, that we should have to have more than just a simple majority to confirm judges, the highest court in the land, a lifetime appointment, that it makes sense that we come together to do that. And in fact, for 7 of the 8 current United States Supreme Courts on the bench today, they received 60 votes or more somewhere in their process. Both President Bush's and President Obama's nominees as well, those now on the court. President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama talked to senators from both parties about their picks to get input as who would likely be supported and not supported. This did not happen with Judge Gorsuch. President Trump had a list chosen by very narrow special interests and did not ask opinions of key people on our side of the aisle as to what would make sense to get the consensus to get 60 votes. I do not believe Judge Gorsuch will be fair and impartial, giving a fair shot to the workers and families in Michigan, as well as around the country. And my test is very much about what is best for the people I represent in Michigan. Who will be fair and impartial and give them a fair shot? Because I do not believe he can do that, I cannot support his nomination. He is not the right choice for this vacancy. We can come together. I would urge my colleagues to go back to the drawing board, bring in a consensus mainstream nominee. In the past, we have basically had a practical rule of saying if the nominee cannot get 60 votes, we change the nominee. We don't change the rules. And it's extremely concerning that that would not be the approach at this time. I would urge that we come together, get a mainstream nominee, and be able to work together to get this done. Thank you, Mr. President.